Hi there, my name is Yoru, and I'm late again! Deltarune is a game that needs no introduction, and I'm guessing you're here for chapter 3 and 4, so I have them timestamped. Feel free to skip, but I would appreciate it if you stayed. I mean, no pressure or anything. Please don't skip! Chapter 1 begins with customizing our beautiful, precious protagonist before the game goes, nah, that you don't get to choose, reminding us once again that choice is just an illusion, and throws us in the life of Chris, an ugly a high schooler, who looks eerily similar to Frisk, but with a different color scheme and a taller version of him.
Explain yourself.
Say.
Never mind.
Then Toriel, our mom, barges in and wakes us up for school. Our side of the room is quite gloomy compared to the left side, that belongs to our big brother off in college, Azrael, as revealed by Toriel later. It's filled to the brim with trophies, and is overall much more colorful and neat. This can even be seen by the way the blankets are folded, and the cracklings on the wood and Chris's side. Once we arrive at school, Toriel hugs us one last time before heading off to class. Our teacher, Alphys, which is a fitting occupation for her in my opinion, informs us that we need to find a partner for the group project. So we end up asking Noelle, our childhood friend, but learn quickly that she had already partnered up with excuse me, one that shan't be named because he's annoying and I hate him. I mean, I could just say Birdly. He's right behind me, isn't he? She proposes to have a group of 3, but before she can ask Mrs. Alphys, someone named Susie barges through the door. Mrs. Alphys becomes very anxious and starts stuttering when talking to her, which leads her to pair us up with Susie. While trying to divert the attention from her, she goes in to write on the board but quickly realizes that there's no chalk, so she sends Susie to go and get it. But since she doesn't trust her enough, Alphys also sends us along, which is when we see Susie eating the chalk. When she notices our presence, she smirks to herself and grabs us by the collar, threatening us that if we were to tell on her, she would bite our face off. So we're forced to oblige by her whims. And as we make our way to the supply closet, the surrounding area dims down, darkening substantially, and the inside is even darker, as it's like it's been completely painted in ivory, making us blind before they decide to turn back for good. But unfortunately for us, the door disappears from sight, and the floor crumbles into oblivion as we fall to our death. Just kidding, we're completely fine, of course. But somehow Chris has a completely different color scheme, with the addition of armor. Neat! The unknown is completely surrounded by mountains, all containing an eerie eye symbol, that as we go further in, sheds black tears much like the void itself. Sometime soon, we finally find Susie. However, she ditches us the moment she thinks of us as a slowpoke. And fast forward an easy mini-fight, the palette of the place completely changes. The purple and blue hues fills us with a calming feeling, as we're greeted with a magnificent city called Castletown. Devoid of people but one, the young naive prince of darkness. He welcomes us as the heroes of light, briefly explaining the prophecy foretold upon him. It's a pretty basic premise that a human and a monster shall appear on the world's edge, and along with the prince shall save the world from calamity and ultimate destruction. As a new dark fountain had come onto the lands of the neighboring kingdom, the balance between dark and light had begun to shatter substantially alongside its deadly merge. But Susie, being Susie, declines this offer, laughing it off as a joke. Before Lancer, the current prince of the other kingdom, makes an appearance to hinder us, as he had thought that we were on the way to seal the fountain, all the while not realizing the information he had blathered out. To go east to return back to our own world. After defeating Lancer, the prince takes off his hood, revealing his cute little face and greenish getup, further introducing himself as Ralsei. But Susie takes off without a single second passing, leaving us alone with Ralsei, who ecstatically greets us once more as he had been alone for as long as he could remember, simply waiting for the day that we would arrive. He then goes on to explain the basics of the combat system before moving on, advising us that it would be in our best interest not to kill the enemies but spare them. We find out that the great door has been opened, presumably by Lancer. Ralsei stops us to inform that the adventure will truly begin from here on out. And as we go through the door, we're greeted with a magnificent field, characterized by many tranquil red trees, and purple grass blowing gracefully in the wind, the field of hopes and dreams. We find Lancer pretty quickly, though unexpectedly, he tells us that he had been beaten up by Susie, which leads us to the Maze of Death, filled with mangled enemies and multiple vandalized signs, all under the name of Lancer, accentuating his stupidity even farther if it wasn't clear to begin with. After yet another short-lived fight with Lancer, we finally find Susie. She continues to act all high and mighty, so Ralsei explains that the puzzle in order to leave required her assistance, so she eventually gives in, which immediately triggers an old-school JRPG party joining sequence. Surely that's not the only time this'll happen, right? We finish the puzzle and fight a bit, and we're out. And wouldn't you know it, It's Lancer again! But unfortunately for him, we have the power of Mean Girls by our side, berating him that he sounds like a baby Santa Claus, and shoving it in his face that he is not scary, as Susie picks him by the collar all the while screaming. But to her dismay, he thanks her, as she supposedly taught him how to be scarier. So another fight and puzzle later, we enter the Great Board of the Card Kingdom. Lancer makes yet another appearance, and I'm so tired of repeating this all over again. He asks Susie on her opinion of his newly thought line, happily expressing that he wishes to become like her, which takes her by surprise. She tries to hide it, but mumbles out that it's kinda cool. But as he forgot to bring any guys, he ends up asking for our group's name as he had been calling us clowns. And since we also had no idea, he suggests voting on it. And I ended up with Fun Gang, shortened from the legendary heroes, the Herald of Fun and Friendship. Great! After a mini-fight with K-Round, an enemy with the most magnificent legs that the heavens have let us sight upon, Susie and Ralsei have a little argument about how Susie shouldn't have violently attacked it, which leads her to leaving the Fun Gang to join arms with Lancer.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Jesse!
James.
Team Rocket! Blast off at the speed of light!
What's their evil plan, you ask? Well, shit, they didn't think this one through. Give him some patience. Anyway, we do some puzzles yet again and eventually meet Clover, another mini-boss who's a three-headed feline. We then find Lancer alone, disguised as a sweet little boy with a marvelous mustache. He tells us that he has an evil plan to carry out supposedly to impress his friend, Susie, which moves Ralsei, so he goes by his whims to build the greatest war machine known to darkness. And I gotta admit, it was pretty fun to design this abomination of a tank. After completing this, Susie comes out from hiding in the bushes only to steal our design and run off again. Ralsei, as the fluffy boy he is, finds this behavior quite wholesome since Susie is finally getting along with someone. As we reach the end of the maze, we see a different weaponry called Tuna, however it doesn't take too long before they blew it up in our faces, to make it known to us that the design sucked. She then initiates a battle where if we defeat her, she'll go back to being on our side as a good guy. However, if we're to lose, we'll join arms as the bad guys. We fight until Lancer slowly starts liking us, which causes Susie to stop fighting as she doesn't want Lancer to do anything he doesn't want to do. And as you can see, this is where she slowly starts slipping the kindness and softness hidden deep inside her, and since a deal's a deal, she comes back to our side. But Lancer gets upset by this as he thinks that they won't be friends anymore. So Susie panics and offers him to join the Fun Gang as well, which he happily accepts. We then see a dark candy tree, which both Lancer and Susie rush to get, since their stomachs growl loudly in hunger. However, as they can't reach her, Lancer shows his special transformation, which is literally just him bending down for someone to climb. But this will become relevant later, trust me. He asks her to tell him how it tastes like, which prompts her to ask back if he's ever had one. And with his answer, she gives the candy to him. She's opening up! As we keep walking, Lancer mentions how nice this feels and like somehow he's doing something important in the process, which then Ralsei explains that that's because it's their purpose as Darkners to assist Lightners, which is why he felt a calming effect around them. And the conversation ends with Lancer mentioning his father's hatred of Lightners. Surely that won't be important, right? As we continue to move ever so closer to the card castle, Lancer grows anxious and eventually falls silent, running off to the castle, which when we finally make it through, he hastily closes the gate on us as we become completely surrounded by guards. Once we awaken, we find ourselves in a cold, dreaded dungeons, sent to be imprisoned eternally until our last breath. But as it becomes very apparent very quickly, the security isn't tight and Susie's in the cell right next to ours. So we help her to solve the puzzle by literally screaming the answers. She then goes downwards to find the key, but is only greeted with Lancer talking to a guard, saying how he couldn't afford the Lightners escaping before realizing her presence. Obviously disappointed in both Lancer and herself for thinking there would be someone who could accept her as is. She violently screams at him, not giving him the chance to explain his reasoning behind this mess. She swings her axe and begins a battle. However, as Lancer, who's not trembling, doesn't attack nor dodge, she gets even more enraged by this demeanor, swinging her axe one last time to finish the job. Although she too misses on purpose as she can't bring herself to kill him, and just tells him to move. But he can't as his bloodthirsty father would be waiting for them. So battle to death was inevitable. She stays silent for a bit before promising him that there would be no battle, just peacefully talking things out. And with that he becomes encouraged again and decides to help both for their sake and his dad's. So Lancer goes to his father to lighten him up, and Susie goes to find the key. And like that, we're out. We take the elevator where Susie softens up even more, asking Ralsei to bake her a cake, on the promise to not make fun of him anymore, and telling us that she finally understands the importance of teamwork that she'll heed to our actions in battle, allowing her to act in all battles forward. From here on out, the tone shifts devastatingly, devoid of colors, much like the king awaiting our arrival, silently watching us from the shadows. But before that, a little joy sprite with Rule's card. The amazing, beautiful, brilliant, genius Duke of Puzzles, who's also the advisory of the king himself. He genuinely might be my favorite NPC in the game. I both literally and hypothetically start kicking my feet like a little girl whenever he comes on screen. Lancer also calls him Lesser Dad, which is just adorable, so I thought I would mention that. We finally reach the throne, only to see a thrashed room, so we go further, catching up to Lancer approaching his father as he announces the joyous news to him. But the king furiously asks where the Lightners were before we make our grand entrance. The king Static slowly grabs Lancer and firmly informs him that he had failed him, but as Lancer goes against his words, he holds Lancer ever more tightly, telling us that if we didn't obey him, Lancer would be thrown off the edge, leaving us with no choice but to kneel before him powerlessly. He casts an attack to end us once and for all, but Lancer counterattacks, targeting his own father, letting us start the battle. After some attempts, he falls onto the ground, expressing how he wasn't always like this, and that even he yearned for the good old days, when Lightners and Darkners were at peace with one another. The others sympathize with him, so Rase heals him up upon seeing that his health had deteriorated extremely. And with that, his sly act comes to an end as he attacks us with all his might, knocking us down immediately. He targets Chris, but before he can kill him, Susie counterattacks him, and the king mocks her, saying to kill him, but Susie laughs at this remark as she casts a pacify spell on him, putting him to slumber. Ralsei rushes, apologizing about how naive his initial thought was, that everything would be alright with just kindness and compassion. But Susie just tells him that it's more complicated than that, and that it's okay to let your guard down for someone we care about. In the same moment, Lancer hurries over, but before we can celebrate properly, a rumbling occurs, urging us to sail the Dark Fountain. Ralsei says his final goodbyes, which causes him to get overwhelmingly emotional, tearing up over how amazing everything has been so far. But as he was mumbling all this, Susie suggests him to take off the hat, finally revealing his true face, who looks eerily similar to Toriel for some unknown reason to us yet, and we depart quickly afterward. Arriving at the multicolored fountain of life, making Chris's soul glow, reaching out to the fountain itself, and upon contact, we arrive back at the supply room where it all began. Susie goes on ahead to inform Mrs. Alphys of the chalk situation, only to realize that the sun was setting, therefore school had already ended. Susie puts her hand on her shoulder, and with a soft expression on her face, says that tomorrow they'll check back on that world together. Toriel then calls us, angry that we had her worried sick as she couldn't reach us for half an hour, but after hearing that we were with a friend, she forgives us and we hurry to our house, mostly because I was getting extremely tired and wanted to stop playing. Toriel informs us that she had been baking a delicious pie for us, as she expresses how lonesome the house had gotten, with Astra's leave for university, and there was also the absence of our dad, though she doesn't mention this. Since the pie wasn't ready yet, we drift off to sleep. And in the middle of the night, when darkness surrounds all, Chris gets up, knocking themselves to the floor. And when they get up, they violently swing their hand towards their torso, piercing out their heart, their very own soul, and locking it up in a cage next to the bed. And next thing we see is a hidden knife, now right in our faces. They snicker, facing the camera with red bloodshot eyes as the screen fades to the credits. Chapter 2 immediately picks up from where we left. As the screen fades to complete darkness, Toriel comes into the room and screams upon the sight before her. However, the screen quickly glitches and turns back to normal, revealing our totally normal room. Toriel comes again, but with an empty baking tray this time, questioning if we had hoggled all the pie to ourselves. Though her annoyance turns into endearment quickly as she mentions that school will start soon. And so we head off to class immediately. Susie, who's now right behind our seat, gives us a warm welcome. Fast forward a bit and she drags us into the dark world as she couldn't sleep that night, wondering if it even was real in the first place, but before we can open the door, Noelle makes an appearance behind us, inviting us to the library for a group study session along with the one that shan't be named. We refuse her offer, but right after, Susie panics as to why she would ask someone like her, leading her to think that she was onto them. Anyhow, the moment we get to the castle town, Ralsei greets us with a hug. However, before we can actually do anything there, Ralsei kindly asks us to bring him something from the light world, a pile of ordinary items from the empty classroom next room, and with this, the castle town transforms, emerging buildings from thin air, bringing everyone to it alongside the process. Lancer greets us, and when asked about his castle, he reveals that it's all gone, so Ralsei further explains that when we sealed the Dark Fountain, its dark world had also ceased to exist, returning darkness to their original state, which was what we had retrieved, simple everyday items. Ralsei insists on bringing us to his castle, surprising us with rooms rooms to call our own, all delicately furnished to our distinct tastes and styles. There's also Lancer's room. But yet again, we need to return to the light world to do the group project. And Lancer, for some reason, adds himself to our pocket as a key item, which then Rolex also takes the opportunity to add himself in there. But I won't be questioning this, so into the library we go! But when we get there, there's no one there and nothing but silence. After a few seconds, Susie gets annoyed and kicks the computer room's door, revealing yet another dark world, covered in green with plugs and wires dropping down from the ceiling, and lights going on and off next to the cliffs. The place becomes more and more destroyed as we go through, until someone yells desperately for help. As they lift up their head, they recognize Susie before ultimately getting taken away by an overhead cage, making Susie yell out her name, Noelle. And the boss for this dark world makes her grand introduction, laughing annoyingly much like Sweetheart, swishing back and forth a wine glass filled with battery acid, making herself known as Queen. Susie yells, questioning why she had taken her, which she remarks she would make Noelle her peon in order to dominate the world. Susie exclaims for her to get down from her floating throne and fight them already, but she simply smugs at this, taking control over two unwilling creatures, transforming them into something unrecognizable to challenge us before vanishing off into the horizon. After defeating the enemies, another swarm of them appears, but thankfully Valsey pops us behind us, and by using his pacify spell, they're gone. As we move further a bit, a groovy robot attacks us, and at the end, it reveals a grand city, glowing marvelously beneath the starless night sky, in the ever so close distance, called Cyber City, as a grain field would have suggested. The robot persists to attack at certain points in between the teacup rides that we utilize to get to the upper parts of the city. During this endeavor, we also learned that there was an ongoing internet shortage, which the citizens theorized was how Queen emerged to power in the first place. And before long, we reach Noelle, but because of her unwillingness, Queen suggests that we persuade her, but since we decline as should be, she challenges us in a mind reprogramming game, which has to be my second favorite minigame. It's literally just a fighting arcade game with very basic controls, just good old ducking, dodging, and attacking. With our victory, the machine self-eradicates itself as the Queen laughs, and amused by our power, she slowly starts gaining respect towards us. With Queen gone, the robot that had attacked us makes an appearance once more. We learned that they were the last resistant group against Queen, and were attacking us because they had thought that we were helping her. Their chemistry is honestly super fun. They're like an old married throuple that's constantly arguing, but in a sweet way, you know? They're Sweet, the speakers, KK, the CD player, and Captain, the cassette player. Anyhow, after the battle, they welcome us to their group and tell us to rendezvous with them at their junk shop, where we learned that Queen made all music illegal for some reason, and that all their songs were 4 seconds long also for some reason. Anyways, we make our way up above the city, where we ride roller coasters towards the fountain. But oh no, Queen's here, and she sends Noelle after us, but seeing that all she does is blush and fidget, she sends yet another peon, who is of course the one that shan't be named. Out of all the possible characters that could have been in his stead, you really chose him? I'm disappointed, Toby. I'm so sorry, Toby, I didn't mean it, I love you. We blow up his roller coaster before we're also thrown into the horizon, as the roller coaster ride hadn't been finished yet. But the trash manages to save our fall. Susie gets a minor injury, which Valsey quickly heals, and this makes Susie want to learn healing magic. Valsey suggests splitting up to get out quicker. And before we can answer who we want to go with, Susie yanks Valsey by the arm and hurries off angrily, leaving us in the dark to explore the Cyber City alone, which eventually leads us to Noelle. But since Queen was also heading towards us, she hides. But surprisingly, Queen, seeing that both of their teams were missing, suggests forming a truce with her. But before we can answer her, the one that shan't be named comes yelling desperately for his queen. Panicking, she goes to hide on top of Noelle, but she somehow doesn't realize this. This also escalates further, so he proposes that Chris and him should form a truce to find their respective teams. And with them gone, Noelle finally comes out of hiding, also proposing for a truce, which makes this triple truce easy! When we arrive at the city, we see how much is filled to the brim with paid ads and pop-ups, which is a perfect analogy of how the internet is today. And I'd also like to think of these dolphin ones as advertisements of the dolphin emulator. After a while, we find ourselves in the presence of Queen yet again. Drunk on pure battery acid, she throws the glass to the ground, completely shattering it, though she assures us that that was her throwing glass, which is something that'll continue to happen forward. She continues on a tangent that we are the only one that truly understands her, that it wouldn't be so bad to become an evil leader in order to make everyone happy. It's also worth mentioning here that before the new Dark Confounding emerged, she used to be quite normal, still a leader, yes, but not as imitating. She apparently overloaded and went rogue during the emerging, which led to her corruption. She mentions that she was enjoying herself by our side, which then the arcade game comes into view. But to no one's surprise, the one that shan't be named pops out of nowhere with an equally as annoying and stupid statue. which for a brief moment causes Queen to overload, lying that she likes the obnoxious thing, then eventually luring him to a different direction before her words, "Not mine," all tabbing out of here. After some more mouse puzzles, the one that shan't be named comes along and ruins all the fun. He comes to the conclusion that we were forcing Noelle to go along with us, and attacks. Then runs off saying that he'd be back. Like, I swear to God, this girl cannot take a break as Queen comes over. To hide from the one that shan't be named, she forces us into her limousine, which then, as there's non-stop traffic, she politely orders Chris to press the walk button, leaving Noelle with her alone to listen to all her mixtapes. And honestly, I'm not even mad about this, because we finally get to see Spampton, and I'm sure he needs no introduction. But I do have to admit, I was expecting to see a bit more of him, and not just in this instance.
So that was a lie.
Anyways, with that out of the way, we continue our ride on Queen's limousine. Noelle questions if she was actually concerned about her, seeing how desperate she was. She brushes this off, rejecting the notion that they wouldn't be able to find her in the end, which prompts her to ask if the reason why Queen chose her was because she was weak enough to make into Queen's peon. She tells her that it's quite the opposite actually, as she views her as a strong person. But before Noelle can say anything back, Queen instructs them to get off and the car explodes just like that, so they split up on the mission without any breather. Noelle gets sentimental, explaining that as surprising as it may be with everything going on, this place felt like a nice change of pace, since she didn't get to leave the town much, reminiscing about the times where the four of them, Des, her older sister, Azriel, Chris and her, explored the town, going into the forest behind the graveyard as children. Despite getting scared and crying during the time, she didn't mind since Des had come after her for comforting. After a short while, we're finally reunited with Susie and Valse, who are eager to show off Susie's newly learned healing magic. We finally arrive at Queen's mansion, though quickly realize that she had been waiting patiently near the entrance. She forcibly persuades Noelle by threatening to endanger the life of the one that shan't be named, then proceeds to capture all of us except for Valse because she only made 4 cages. Much like before, communication between rooms is easily possible, so Susie advises us to check our inventory, and as you all remember, Lancer was in our key items, so we literally deploy him from our pockets. He manages to get us out by overloading the computer with a request of 9.99 shovels. Brilliant! When we get out of the room, Lancer falls onto the ground, feeling very ill. Susie tries to heal, but seeing that it's not enough, we're off to find Valse, though we get stopped by the one that shan't be named, who joins us to find the others. After not being able to solve the multiple puzzles ahead, he becomes infuriated, and seeing this pathetic scene unfold, Susie mocks him that he's a dumbass just like the rest of them, but instead of lashing out, he admits to this call-out, which is when we get to hear his stupid-ass backstory. Basically, he was always forgotten by those around him as a child until Noelle and him went on a spelling bee where she got so nervous that she was unable to speak, causing his immediate victory against her, and when he finally got a taste of being recognized and admired, this went over his head, so he kept Noelle by his side to make himself appear smarter. Nailed it! As he sulks over this, Lancer makes a remark that everyone's dumb, which Susie continues that it didn't matter at the end of the day, as their opinion of him wouldn't change nonetheless. Overjoyed by this, we happily continue onward, where we find Valse dressed up like a butler. Unfortunately, however, Lancer turns into a stone statue. Valse explains that darkness can't exist outside their own dark world, but reassures us that he'll be back to normal once we reach the fountain, as its life force is so strong that it doesn't matter whether it's the dark world they belong to or not. The one that shan't be named requests Susie to assist him in saving Noelle, as he knew the castle's shortcuts, which she of course accepts, and he goes ahead in his plan, arranging to meet up back at the roof. After making our way through the castle, breaking vases that trigger gotta sweep as enemies, no hate, and completely destroying the dining hall, we meet up with the one that shan't be named, to which Susie goes off with him to bring about their plans, leaving Valse with us to traverse the acid pool, which, might I add, is extremely slow and boring, other than the occasional dialogues with Valse about how much he's learned about what it means to be friends. And yeah, it's really wholesome, but still. But worry not, my dear child! All is safe, for our Lord and Majesty Rolex has come as to grace himself, forcing us to battle against our own child of beautiful creation! Oh, woe is me! After that grand fight, we imagine what Susie's up to now, cutting the scene to Noelle looking outside from her window, glancing ever so wonderingly at the moon, wishing that Des was there to comfort her. She then gets ambushed by 2 werewires, which Susie immediately comes to the rescue, axing them for good. Noelle questions what this place even is, to which Susie lies, saying that it's merely a dream. Surprisingly, she is a bit saddened by this, as she thinks that Susie in real life doesn't care about nor notice her. Unable to say much, she asks if Noelle ever had wondered why she never got picked on by her before. And although Noelle nods to this, she babbles on about a day when Noelle lent her a pencil as she simply couldn't forget her kind and gentle smile. She laughs at how specific she was in her description, to which Susie also questions if she saw her frequently in her dreams. But Noelle blushes and avoids this like the plague. Wink wink, hint hint! And this lovely ship doesn't stop there, folks, cause now it's heart-shaped Ferris wheel time that's ever so conveniently placed next to the room. They finally have their first quote-unquote date where they bond over their enjoyment of horror movies, and that Susie's toughness was what was so great about her, as she was secretly jealous of her in that aspect, not being afraid to break the rules because of the good and innocent girl persona she had. Now I know I'm saying these relatively normal, but let me tell you, I was fangirling like crazy the entire time. But before their newly blossomed relationship could develop further, the one that shan't be named descends from the sky with a single red rose, cunningly announcing that he's here to save her. So without any time passing, Susie goes off to join Chris, and the one that shan't be named actually apologizes to Noelle. Development, we love to see that. Huh? What? No! Oh, come on! So he only says sorry for quote-unquote leading her on, and notifies that he has a crush. Who is Susie? God, may the poor soul be protected from this arrogant prick. Amen. Afterwards, we finally encountered Queen, but as Susie laughs in her face about Noella's rescue, she unleashes a mind-controlled one that shan't be named upon us, who fights mindlessly and with great fierceness. Once we're able to bring him back, we go on to defeat her altogether, by which I mean the first phase, cause before we can challenge her, she makes a run for it. We then overhear Queen talking about how the knight extended his hand to create this world today, and as the knight was also a lightner, she theorized that she could harness the lightner's power to create a fountain for herself. We come out of hiding to kick her butt as soon as we see Noelle tied up, and before we can react, she comes into view with her giant robot knocking us down to fall onto the ground. The one that shan't be named comes to the rescue alongside every citizen of the cyberworld as we ride the roller coasters toward Queen. They all come together to form the ultimate battle mecha, bringing us back to the arcade style fight from before. After 3 rounds, the fight ends, but she ends up destroying our mecha and yanking us to hold hostage for Noelle to obey her, to create their ultimate empire in the new dark world, thinking out loud that it would make Noelle happy. But Noelle objects, exclaiming that she'll never be happy that way. Queen makes a sad expression, then telling her to choose the world that would make her happy in the end before shutting off for good. As Noelle didn't expect such a response, she goes on to say that maybe this world wasn't as scary nor bad as she had originally thought, which then Susie adds that the dark world ruled, as they had garnered so many new friends which wouldn't have been possible in the light world, and that no one told them what to do in here either. So the one that shan't be named grabs his sword, intent on creating a new dark world. However, before he can pierce the ground, Ralsei yells for them to stop. Clearly upset by their demeanor, he explains what would happen in that situation, the roaring as he calls it, when darkness beats light, bringing titans to roam upon the lands, causing total chaos. When the cutscene fades, even Queen is surprised by this knowledge. After a bit, we go on to see the fountain yet again, which brings us back to the library. Susie offers to walk us back to her house, but before she can go, Toriel opens the door and invites her over for pie, by which she meant to bake it together. Once we go to wash our hands, we turn on the sink, and as soon as we do, Chris's legs give up, falling onto the ground. They pierce their heart yet again, throwing it under the sink. They slowly start walking towards the window, revealing the outside as pitch black, then throwing themselves through it. Toriel and Susie have a really wholesome talk in the background before Chris comes back and puts their heart back in its place. We head back to the kitchen as Toriel asks Susie if she wanted to stay for the night, making this their first sleepover, and they decide to marathon movies to pass the night. While watching TV, Susie excitedly talks about how amazing it would be if we could bring back Ralsei, Lancer, and the others into the light world, suggesting that they should at least try to make an effort to accomplish this. Laughing wholeheartedly about how Ralsei could do her homework, and Lancer could live under Chris's bed. As we drift off to sleep, Toriel makes a phone call to the police that she had seen someone outside, and when she went to check her car, the tires were all slashed. She then comes over to read a book on the armchair. In the middle of the night, when everyone's asleep, Chris wakes up again to throw away their heart. They proceed to open the front door, turn on the TV, and with the knife they held, they pierce through the earth, creating the dreaded dark world, unleashing a dark smoke, as the scene ends with the smoke becoming visible on the TV. We can't trust Chris anymore. We wake up on a monster couch, presumably still in our house as a dark fountain was created there. Susie wakes up Chris by kicking them. The color scheme is completely filled with purple hues, much like the first Dark World. As we go through what seems like an endless bridge, Ralsei makes his appearance, catching us by surprise from behind. Susie excitedly tells him about their sleepover, and continuing the conversation from last night, she invites him to the festival, but Ralsei just makes a sad expression, saying that he's a darkener, explaining that these worlds were merely an alternate view of reality, something made possible by the fountains, as in reality, darkeners were only objects born from abstract images created in darkness. In other words, it was all an illusion. Susie, baffled by this, questions how that could be true, as everyone alongside Ralsei had emotions, to which he replies with, "That's right, Susie, they shouldn't. That's why I don't want you and Chris to worry too much about us, okay? It's funny, I was overjoyed to make friends. Then, selfishly, I started feeling sad too. Sad I couldn't be your friend in real life, Susie. That I can't do your homework, that I can't go with you, that I can't be there to help you when you really need me. I'm sorry. That's why if you know me, Lancer, we can't do it all. So, if you ever feel like we're not enough, just forget about us and make some real friends, okay?" Susie gets so enraged by this that she doesn't give him any time to respond, desperately yelling that they're real in her eyes, almost driving her to the point of crying. But before long, spotlight shines brightly on them, announcing how much of a spectacular performance that was. Flabbergasted by this, they exclaim who that was. My cue the VHS! Making this, I think, the only time that we get to hear a character's voice in-game, broadcasting that they were the contestants of today's show in Mr. Tenna's marvelous mystery board TV time. As he goes on and on about the fun they'll be having along with the mysterious grand prize, Susie snaps at him that they won't be entertaining him. But since Ralsei suggests that despite not being able to attend the festival, maybe they could try having fun here, and so we agree to give this a shot. The curtains rise and the show begins! We write our names down, but since we're only given 3 letters to work with, I chose to go with KK. You know, like from Animal Crossing? Anyway, he informs us that the first game will be within a video game, and so we boot up The Legend of Zelda. The area is filled with pop quizzes that gets faster each time. And my other 2 favorite NPCs in the game, Lalina and Elnina, 2 weathercaster lovers madly in love. They even have a special winning condition of saying I love TV 99 times. The fight starts off fairly normal, but then they slowly start to argue over whose attack is superior. And at one point, Rolex accidentally wanders in and asks if they're single. Wink wink, hint hint. And a couple attacks later, they officially break up. Elnina starts crying, so Mr. Tenna intervenes, ending the fight early, giving us the Mooncloud Stone, along with the 3 keys we found, concluding our first adventure. But as soon as we open the door, the lights go out for a second before turning back on to reveal everyone's adorable costumes. Ralsei is my personal favorite. The physical challenge for today is a stacking minigame with a cooking theme. And also, sorry if it seems like I'm skipping these minigames, it just would be too tedious in my opinion. After finishing, the credits roll with us smiling in the background before Mr. Tenna kicks the credits into oblivion, saying that there's no way it could end like that as the funometer was only at 80%. Demanding a second round, he throws us into the green room to rest up before starting it again. While waiting, we can convince both Lalina and Elnina that they should talk things out, as they were pitifully crying non-stop about how everything reminded them of each other. Once we go out, however, Susie goes on ahead without us to ask Mr. Tenna about the next round. Instead of going after her, we imagine what she's up to, cutting the scene to Susie. We see that she had actually gone to tell Tenna that his games were really fun to play, especially since it was distracting her from the conversation she had with Ralsei earlier. He becomes so overjoyed that he also shares that he too had been quite lonely up until now. And with that, the second round begins. It's within a game yet again, but on a tropical island for a change. There isn't anything worth mentioning other than that we tried to bring Lalina and Elnina together near the end at Lover's Peak. They apologize to each other wholeheartedly, but as soon as Lalina goes to Lover's Peak to reunite, we see Rolex next to her, explaining that he was the current lover, which enrages Lalina. But to everyone's surprise, Rolex adds that they shouldn't be apart, so they should form a power throuple, which they of course agree to as he's perfect and hot in every single way. I mean, who could resist him? Am I right or am I right? While they take off, a bridge is created, dramatically revealing the physical challenge. Rhythm minigame, let's go! With Susie on the drums, Ralsei on vocals, and Chris on the guitar, creating the greatest and coolest band the Darkner's ever seen. As the credits rolled, Mr. Tenna objects yet again to the round ending as the funometer had been going over the objective, forcing us to do the incentive, aka the bonus round. When we go over to Tenna to discuss this situation, we overhear him on the phone talking about something that'll cause trouble if Susie were to find out. Though Susie doesn't ask anything further and goes off without saying much, to ease our worries and suspicion over him, we finally go off to explore this dark world, and without having to explore much, we find the first room in order to fill in the pages. Darkness looms over us with the TVs that don't seem to be showing anything in the background, revealing the locked next room. Once we complete the 2 puzzles, we step inside a place filled with ice and mountains of snow, underneath a starry night sky, going a bit further to reveal the dark fountain we seeked. However, we're quickly distracted by a giant toy ball beneath a Christmas tree. As we move closer, the inside is unveiled, containing Toriel. Before we can even process the sight before us, Tenna comes enthusiastically raving about how Toriel will be his grand trump card. So he picks up the toy ball, which exposes us. This immediately brings us back to the board. As Tenna goes on and on about the new challenge without giving us any time to speak, Susie reasonably loses it, demanding that he gives up Toriel and lets them return to the light world. He doesn't pay much attention to this, as he offers us to play once more, before losing his smile and trapping us in the same toy ball, forcing the games to start. This time he takes control over the player, chasing the pop quizzes and enemies, as even they run away from him in fright. The stage becomes engulfed in flames as we start losing our morale, no longer resisting, only idly standing by in utter defeat. This repeats itself for a while, until we reach 100 TP in battle to act the off button, turning off the screen entirely, and when it comes back on, we're nowhere to be seen. Tenna starts sweating bullets, sounding the alarm system for everyone to be on the lookout for us in an instant, cutting back to us as we delve into the backstage. And for a change of atmosphere, we enter into the Wild West-esque minigame, where we literally ride Horse Ralsei as we gun down enemies, finding ourselves within a large room with TV screens all across, showing the different shows on Tenna's TV time, fighting watercolors that are somehow more menacing than the actual enemies, and then dodging the lights to avoid getting caught like the skillful stealth machine we are, freeing the corporate slaves from their miserable office jobs, letting us recruit all of them to Castletown. Which brings us to finally reaching Mr. Tenna's whereabouts as he loses his mind over a phone call after disappearing from sight. But again, worry not, my dear child, for Rolex has appeared before thou to challenge thyself, the fluffy boy and the mean girl. We all know the deal and the clips, so here's my reaction. At the end of the fight, both Lelina and Elnina decide to break things off with Rolex, and surprisingly he bows down, saying that his mission of reuniting them had been complete, then running off as he's chased away by unpaid employees of his. We find Tenna quickly after as he desperately tells his employees to not leave him in the dark, then spewing out that apparently Spamton had a part in all of this, albeit small, but still. Even Mike leaves him at the end. We find the last console, but strangely it starts out within our own house, before having to press the TV inside the living room to actually start the puzzle, returning us to the cold, icy place, making us shiver in every step we take. But alas, Tenna comes forward about how he couldn't let them leave, before saying that Chris knew the reason why. As we cut to a flashback of everyone gathered up at the TV in the holiday season, having a blast, just spending time together and watching their favorite shows. But as time passed on, one by one, they eventually stopped watching, leaving Tenna all alone until the Dark Fountain was created, finally giving Tenna the chance to live out his glory days once again. And since we all refuse to go by his whims, we begin the battle. After defeating him, Ralsei tries to comfort him that he too understood his pains, but that didn't make it okay for him to hinder Lightners, since Darkners would inevitably be forgotten with the passage of time, which doesn't really work out, so Susie intervenes to explain how she sees the situation as. She explains how she was always the scary one in others' eyes, and that her family would constantly be on the move, which hindered her chances of making friends even more. That was until she moved to Chris's town. When Toriel noticed her crying in the graveyard, she told her that everything would be alright, the only person who actually listened to her without any prejudice. This gave her hope, even by a little, and that now her wish had been granted. She just needs to find the right people. She happily adds that someone in the neighborhood would want a TV and that they would ask around, which brings back Tenna's spirits, giving him hope for the future. So he finally gives up Toriel to us, allowing us to seal a fountain for good, despite the knight's orders given to him. Susie goes to Ralsei with the softest expression on her face to tell him that no one would be left behind, especially not him. We go back to Tenna as he slowly opened the toy ball, lowering Toriel to us before getting struck down, tearing off his limbs in the most cruel way, only to reveal the roaring knight standing before us in the darkness. They try to take away Toriel, but Susie steps in to protect her, which causes the knight to scream in the most pained and violent voice imaginable. Their eyes expand as their ribs become exposed to air, revealing an eye of some sort, and forming a dark blade out of thin air. Panic instills within us as we can't do anything but miserably fail against the swift and cruel attacks. Eventually, we fall onto the ground defeated, letting them take Toriel as we can only watch now. But with our last breath, Susie grabs their leg, which gives enough time for Undyne to come? However, this ends with no avail as the knight transforms into a bird, taking Undyne with them on their back. We try chasing after them, revealing the great door from the first chapter, which takes us back to the front of Chris's house as dark smoke emerges from the inside. But before we can react, Susie yanks us along as she saw someone moving. We go beyond the church, running towards the engulfed shelter with all our strength, but to our dismay, the door closes on us. Susie loudly bangs on the door, revealing a panel with a code input. She continues to bang on the door as rage fills up in her. Beaten and defeated, we can only go back to steal the fountain. She goes away quietly, leaving Chris beside the door, and once inspected, we see 3 symbols on the panel, one with a pine tree, the other's an officer's badge, and lastly, Deltarune itself. With this knowledge, Chris slightly backs off as the door nudges open. Chapter 4 unexpectedly picks up from when Susie and Chris arrive at the Dark Fountain in TV World. As they look ever so wonderingly at the fountain, Susie explains that despite how dangerous their adventures got, at the end of the day they were from another world, something that they shouldn't be so concerned about. But now that Undyne had gone taken away, the realities started to blend together, merging the two into one. She eventually falls silent as there would be no point in further discussing the situation, but then immediately starts yelling at Chris to seal the fountain. Which brings us back to the house, when we slowly wake up to Toriel's soft pats as she calls out to us to eat breakfast. As we stuff the delicious infinite omelets and butterscotch pancakes in our mouths, Toriel asks Susie if she would want to come to the church. Despite her hesitance at first, she accepts, thinking that they could maybe find out how to get inside the shelter after service, since it was in close proximity, and so we head out. Toriel goes ahead for choir, leaving us with Susie to attend the sermon. The pastor, Father Alvin, begins by telling the story of Deltarune, so the other reality was seen as a religion in the Lightner's eyes, and this makes sense as it's the story between light and dark. Another interesting thing was the line, "Heaven knows the beauty of the soul." Was this a reason why Chris acted the way they did whenever they pulled out their heart? Without a soul, you became part of the darkness maybe, as none of the Darkners had a soul to begin with. Again, these are all my speculations, so don't take anything seriously. Anyways, after finishing up, Father Alvin calls out to Caddy to read the holy words, which is when we get to hear the most majestic reading of all time. So we should all be nice to each other, right? That's the main thingy of our religion, you know? And just be nice to everyone, we're all family. No matter what kind of person or who they are. We believe weird crap, but we're totally... You don't know who's gonna grow up to be a hero, right? We then make a toast as we chug down fruit juice like absolute maniacs, and it's honestly just so nice seeing them get closer and closer. Chris goes on ahead to talk with Mrs. Affes, as Susie continues to chug the fruit juice non-stop calm down, girl! We learned that the shelter was originally used for emergencies, who could have guessed, before ultimately getting locked forever for some unknown reason. She also mentions that she has only seen the mayor and Undyne go inside it so far, and so they might be of help. We also ask Noelle about the locked door, but she assumes that they were talking about the times they got locked out of their own house, which made her stay at Chris's sometimes. But despite this, her mom never gave Chris's family a spare key, and that she never kept anything at the city hall but instead locked everything up in her house. Not only giving some insight about her, but also allowing us to go back to Susie. At first she thinks of going to the city hall, but then quickly remembering that Noelle's mom was a mayor, so their best bet would be to sneak into their house for clues. So Susie goes over to Noelle to ask if she wanted to work on the group project back in her house, to which she happily accepts without any questions asked. As we go outside with Toriel, Asgore of all people comes out from the bushes. Toriel makes an uncomfortable expression while trying to avoid him, though Asgore doesn't realize this, so he offers her a bouquet of flowers, but Toriel gets even more uncomfortable by this gesture and straight up leaves. Saddened by this, he leaves a flower to Chris before leaving as well. I decided to go back to Castletown before moving onwards with the story, so Ralsei invites us to go back to our rooms as he had a surprise for us, a tea party! As we drink our teas, Susie opens up a bit about how she always had to be tough out of necessity, and that this wasn't the case anymore with Ralsei and Chris around. Ralsei tells her how proud he is of her, before Susie continues that he too had gone under a change, that he was losing his stuck-up attitude over being overtly good-natured. We then go through Lancer's, Tenna's, and Queen's rooms, respectively, before reaching Ralsei's room. Though he doesn't want us to go inside, Susie barges through as always, revealing a completely empty room, which brings a miserable expression on his face, stating that his only purpose for being was to make them happy, and so by that logic, he wouldn't need a room to begin with. However, Susie quickly interrupts him, saying that Chris and her would fill the room to the brim until he had the coolest room in the entire castle. When she goes on ahead, Ralsei turns to Chris, saying how since their arrival, he slowly began to have interests, dislikes, and desires of his own, then asking us if it was okay for someone like him to feel that way. Depending on our response, he blushes before Susie ultimately comes back with a trash can, declaring it the first furniture piece of the room. We return back to Light World right after, as we make our way over to Noelle's house, mansion. We sit down on the couch to discuss the projects, but as soon as we do, Noelle gets a phone call from the one that shan't be named, asking if she wanted to be his date for the festival. Her voice goes quiet as she becomes upset at herself for not being able to say no, so as she hesitantly accepts, Susie proceeds to yank the phone, yelling that she didn't want to go, then throwing the phone away, like the absolute queen she is. She thanks Susie, then voicing that she really needs to be honest, that she should shake his neck and scream at him the next time she sees him! Surprised at herself for losing it, she nervously laughs, asking where she threw the phone. So Susie advises us to search the house while she keeps her busy. Dessa's door was looking really suspicious, so I chose to go there first. And yeah, it's a complete contrast to the house and Noelle's room, which are all filled with white, neutral, and pastel tones. It's dim with green hues, almost in a sickly way, as even the walls are grimy, like it's been abandoned for some time now. A single glimmer shone for us to inspect on the guitar near the closet. The code for the shelter was now right before us, but Chris strikes away, hollowing at their heart, and throwing it away in one of the pre-opened gift boxes in another room, returning to who knows where. The heart, the player itself, hastily gets out, sneaking in the vent to retrieve back the shelter note. If we head towards the kitchen in this moment, we can overhear a call made to Chris, firstly signifying that Susie mustn't obtain the guitar nor the code, secondly that Chris needed the heart to create yet another dark world, thirdly something about an event that would occur at the church tonight, and lastly that a police officer would be sacrificed sooner or later. So it isn't that odd to speculate that this was the night talking, and that also, much like I said before, a soul was needed in order to be a lightener. If we are to get caught here and return back, Chris notices us in the vents, and goes ahead to play the piano, which we'll get to hear the importance of the scene later. Going to the bathroom also reveals that Asgore was working for the Holiday family as a housekeeper. And then I believe in the mayor's room, he talks about how he'll prove to Toriel that all he wanted was to protect everyone, and something about a black shard, which again, we don't have any info on for now, but I'd love to hear your opinions on this in the comments. We eventually go down to the basement when we eavesdrop on Susie and Noelle just hanging out and bonding. They lean closer to each other as they fall silent, thinking how comforting it feels, even if they're not talking. But in order to get their attention, we turn off the power entirely, then hide under an angel's doll as they arrive. We scare them a bit, but then Noelle rationalizes that it just might be a mouse underneath it, so they take it back to the living area. This gives us access to Dessa's room again, as Chris made sure to lock the vents. And when we get there, they strike us down, coming out of hiding under the bed like a f***ing paranoid maniac. Susie and Noelle get startled by the noise, and seeing that the angel was knocked down, they head over thinking he might have escaped to Dessa's room, as they chill out near the bed, waiting for the thing to come out. The camera focuses on the inside of the closet, where we try to get past Chris in order to obtain the note. Susie asks about her dream further in the background, and Noelle mentions how strange the boy was, remarking that he looked awfully similar to Asriel. But before she can continue, we reach out to the note, making Chris hit us with all his might, causing a scene. So Susie opens the closet and yanks the guitar out of our hands. Noelle becomes a bit upset, though she quickly changes the tone and requests Susie to play it for her, and so they leave. Chris slowly comes out but makes a phone call to the knight that Susie had obtained the guitar. They tell Chris that they would arrive soon, and with that, Chris puts back the heart inside them, also heading out. We cut to Susie trying to play the guitar but failing miserably, though Noelle insists that she still wants to hear, so they continue to flirt and blush through the entire scene. But Asgore eventually turns the power back on, interrupting them in the process. As he munches on the snacks, he informs Noelle that he saw Mrs. Holiday just outside the window, and before they can get out, Carol Holiday comes through the door with the most cold expression, almost as if she was a statue. Without even listening to what Noelle has to say, she yanks the guitar guitar off of Susie's hands and demands her to get out right this instant. Noelle anxiously tries to explain the situation, but she cuts her off, calling her out to have a discussion in the kitchen. Susie also tries to explain, but as Carol made it very clear to her that she didn't want her to even talk to her daughter, let alone be in her very presence, Susie can't do anything but walk out. But she too doesn't let her pride down, and yells out that she would be taking Noelle to the festival before running off, which makes Carol even more upset as they enter the kitchen. Seeing that there's nothing to do now, we also get out, but Carol stops us in our steps, apologizing that we had to see something like that, then telling us that we, in all caps, were always welcome. Once we go out, Susie angrily blames herself for not writing the code down, as she couldn't remember it before rain starts to pour down, so we make our way to Chris's house, but seeing that it was locked, we decide to head back to the church for Toriel. But once we arrive, we're only met with a dark smoke, signifying the newly created dark world. At first, Susie rationalizes that it might be better to wait outside since they had to come out at one point, but since Toriel was inside, she changes her mind and immediately steps inside with urgency. The Dark Sanctuary, as it's called, is filled with cold cobblestone walls and floors, dimly lit candles and lanterns, grand architecture scattered all over, and beautifully stained glass. All these elements combined makes for a strange yet calming aura around the place. We find the fountain pretty quickly, though to our dismay, the roaring night shows themselves and strikes down Susie, parting the bridge we stood on. Only Chris can now move towards the night, but alas, we get struck down as well before even reaching them. It's to be noted that if we are to successfully reach the night, Chris won't attack them no matter what, but this also leads to the same conclusion. As we fall down, a glass tapestry that reads, "The legend of this world, Deltarune," can be seen before we inevitably shatter it as we fall to the platform below. Susie notices our injury, so she tries healing, but as it didn't prove to be enough, she wishes for Ralsei's presence. Which then, since she hears someone in the background, assumes that it must be Ralsei and calls out his name. So Ralsei comes rushing in. Susie asks him to show her how to heal better, but is quickly interrupted as he tells her to move out of the way, which reasonably upsets her, but she doesn't speak out. And as we move on with the adventure, we see yet another glass tapestry depicting the prophecy of Deltarune. These show up more as we continue further, so I'll be reading them out in order now. The prophecy, which whispers among the shadows, the legend of this world, Deltarune. A world basked in purest light, beneath it grew eternal night. If fountains freed, the roaring cries, and titans chafed from darkened eyes. The light and dark, both burning dire, a countdown to the world's expire. A pointy-headed will say toothpaste and then boy. Which, this makes Susie laugh out loud, saying that she didn't realize that the prophecy was supposed to be this accurate. Anyways, let's continue. But lo, on hopes and dreams they send, 3 heroes at the world's end. But before we can go further, someone shatters the tapestry from the shadows, leaving us in pitch black. We eventually manage to find a single lantern, and as we move towards it, the lights come back on, revealing an elderly yet elegant tortoise man. He kindly asks Susie to bring him back to his study, but she refuses at first, telling him that they can't just help out every darkner they see, to which the old man questions what darkners were. So Susie assumes that he might be a lightener, which brings us to assisting him. When Susie sees how slow he walks, however, she rushes ahead. Then Ralsei also follows by, to which the old man power walks past us like nothing. He asks us to reach out for the green book on the shelf, so Ralsei bends down. "See, I told you Lancer's transformation would be relevant!" But the old man just tells him that he still needs Susie's assistance, so she steps on him, literally splattering Ralsei in the process. But once we get the book, the door, which was previously locked, opens up. We find notes along the way, which help us solve the piano puzzles, which blocked us off from paths, letting us reach the study, which is easily the most comforting area in the entire game in my opinion. It also contains the locked door which leads to the fountain. We head to the Northwest Library, and at its end lies complete darkness, as a single voice calls out for us to go back before it's too late, which we don't listen to, starting the battle. And it's probably just me, but I'm not kidding when I say that Jackenstein took me 40 plus minutes to beat. I was actually going insane, and even rage quit a few times before trying again, to the point I could hear hornets get good chance in the background. Though again, I love the concept and fight design, so... Anyways, when we finally beat him, it reveals the cute but clumsy giant monster, who runs away in fright as he thinks that no one should see his face because it was too scary. But as he accidentally hit himself with a chandelier, Ralsei apologizes and heals him, but he screams in pain still, as the spell didn't do anything. Susie suggests helping, but before she can say anything to Ralsei, she ultimately decides to go away sulking, which is when the old man comes out of the blue. He questions why she wasn't helping the giant fellow, but she just responds with how she's not that good enough, blathering on about how there would be no point in practicing healing magic either, as she would never be as good as Ralsei, so instead she should just stick to what she's good at, which the old man points out that she was just being a coward. She lashes out on him, but he just stays calm and points to his finger, telling her to heal it in order to prove that she wasn't a coward, and when she casts it, he dodges immediately, which makes it go into Jack Stein's mouth and heals him up in no time. The old man disappears without a trace just like that, and Jackie Stein gives us the claim claws, which were needed to further the story. We eventually find a grand piano, but since we didn't know the notes yet, we move on to find yet another secret door. Susie goes on ahead alone, only to see the old man writing his letter. She questions why he was writing in the first place, as this world was just a dream, but he doesn't pay much attention, so the room goes quiet before she speaks up again to thank him for the lecture, and asks if he knew where the music notes were, which he literally just pulls up the curtains to reveal the long note. He gives her a pen and paper to write it all down, saying he wouldn't be a teacher if he didn't give homework, to which Susie laughs and responds with a "screw you." They had truly become the teacher and pupil. Their relationship is just so sweet and non-judgmental. They can just enjoy each other's company, even in silence. Once we go back to the piano, Chris tries to play but fails, so Ralsei insists that maybe he should play it, but Susie just cuts him off, explaining that today Toriel had told her how great of a piano player Chris was, and so she knew that they could do it, greatly encouraging them. So they slowly sit down again, take a deep breath, and outstretch their weary fingers to play a majestic tune. Every time Chris plays, I get quite emotional and start crying. It's such a peaceful yet painting scene unfolding before our very own eyes. This wasn't the player's actions, as we saw much earlier in the events, but Chris themselves. As they continue to play, the locked door to the fountain opens up. Once we return to the study, the old man requests Susie to read his letter, and when she awakens, to rewrite it all down on paper. Susie finds this quite odd, but still agrees to it. We then say our goodbyes to the old man and move out. The tapestries lie before us yet again, continuing the prophecy. The knight, which makes with blackened knife, shall duel with heroes strife by strife. But before long, the knight appears. We dodge all their attacks, going after them, but they escape into the great door, shutting us out completely, so we go on to steal the fountain, returning us to the church during nighttime. But as it appears, another dark world had already been created right next to the previous one, and since it had a lock, we go into Father Alvin's office, only to find a dusty old glass case with a hammer inside. As soon as Chris sees this, they back off, which then Susie also follows suit, as she panickingly asks if the dust inside belonged to a monster that had passed away, and next to it lay a photo of the old man, confirming their suspicions, which also revealed the reason why he had made Susie read out his letter to rewrite. She honors his one last request and writes everything down. Once we head to the other room with the piano, if we inspect it, we get to hear a bittersweet story. When Susie was much younger, there was a plaza with a public piano near her neighborhood. At first, she excitedly sat down and tried her best to play, but since she wasn't good at it, she got scolded, and they banned her from playing it. But when she saw that they had let someone else, someone much better, play it instead, she snuck in that very same night and smashed the piano. She ties this with how if she had seen Chris playing before knowing them well, she probably would have hated their guts. But now that feeling had gone away, and instead she wanted to hear more of Chris playing. If we reply with, "If you play too," we can make her smile as she excitedly says how amazing that would be if Chris could teach her. As we can't find the clues necessary to open the door, Susie makes a wild suggestion, to create a dark world so that maybe they could talk to the old man for clues. Which at this point, I genuinely don't know if Chris agrees, because it might be beneficiary for the night, or because they actually think it's a good idea. But Susie pierces the earth anyway. We arrive back at where we left off, though the colors become all weird, making everything a bit uncanny. While we rush to the study, we continue reading the prophecy. The third hero, the prince alone in deepest dark. The first hero, the cage with human soul and parts. And last was the girl, at last was the girl. The second hero, the girl with hope crossed in her heart. Love finds itself to the girl. The last prophecy, the story's end. To save the world, there is only one way. But just before we can read the next tapestry, someone who looks similar to the old man shatters it. And as we go after him, the platform underneath us also shatters. This finally leads us to the study. But since he wasn't there, we continue towards the fireplace, which was now extinguished, revealing the secret door. As we go further inside, it darkens substantially, painting the room in jet black. Eventually, we hear church bells going off in the distance, which turns into a violin noise, and many more. As we move towards the source of the various noises, Susie advises us to stay put while she tries to find a way out. And when she leaves, who seems like the old man is now right in front of her, she tries calling out but no response. They move even closer until they jump at us at full speed, but stop right before attacking. They laugh, which gives away his identity, as he laughed in the same manner as the old man, but a battle begins nonetheless. Near the end of the fight, she desperately casts a healing spell on him, thinking that maybe he would recognize her. But with that faint light, we see a distorted form, mimicking the old man, but not quite. Ralsei comes from behind and kicks it multiple times until its blood splatters from its cracked armor, destroying it completely in a gruesome way. Lightning strikes down alongside the somber rain, revealing Ralsei under beautiful tapestries. He explains to her that that wasn't the old man, but a simple statue from a study, and that he simply didn't exist in this world. As he continues explaining, Susie clenches her fists in pure anger, then yelling in his face as to why he didn't say anything earlier. The lightning grows stronger and violent. She slowly moves towards him, all the while continuing to yell. Ralsei's legs give out in terror, as she covers her face in anger, losing her mind over everything that had happened so far, and that most importantly, Ralsei was always so secretive, never explaining anything properly despite knowing the prophecy's end. The lightning dies out, only the sweet sounds of the rain can be heard. Ralsei apologizes profusely, that he knew so many, even too many things, weeping silently under Susie. Her expression turns soft, and her eyes engulfed with guilt over what she had done. Ralsei cries out about how he didn't want to speak of the events that would unfold, that he didn't have a choice as to whether he wished to know the things he did or not. He forces himself to smile, while saying that he would be carrying this burden on his shoulders alone. Susie, unable to say much, just kneels down, asking if that was the reason why he was acting strange today. But he just says that he was trying to stay ahead of them, in order for them to not see how the prophecy would end. As Susie starts speaking, Ralsei grabs her arm in terror, asking if they had seen her already, then begging her for him to go on ahead and destroy every last tapestry awaiting them. Susie doesn't question this, but instead tries her best to comfort him. After this ordeal, we all make up. An NPC gives out the code, and so we go on to seal the fountain. Susie puts in the input, taking us back to the great door which the knight had escaped into, was now open. Once we go through it, the fountain itself shrieks, calling us to an urgency, but the knight hastily destroys the path, though to our surprise, Jackenstein comes to our aid to help us climb up. The knight strikes again, and as we fall back to the platform, every Darkner comes forward to help us get to the other side. The lights go out, and something attacks us within the shadows, but in that very same moment, Chris's soul glows brighter than any star, illuminating the way forward as the knight's blades try striking us down with all their might. Their attacks become undodgeable as it goes on, and as Chris's health deteriorated extremely, Susie protects us on the next attack, saying how she couldn't let Chris take all the bullets. And when her health got low as well, Ralsei comes forward. Nothing could stop them now. Their determination would not go away easily. The knight now stood before us. They snicker, lifting up their blade high, piercing the ground beneath to create another dark world. This was the end. The fountain, reaching up to the heavens, solidifies, emerging eyes from its cracks, and then a giant cracking sound echoes as a giant arm arises from within. The Titan was successfully formed, a creature of pure destruction. We climb on the solidified fountain in hopes of reaching it, but we stop at a higher platform, trying to make sense of everything. Ralsei theorizes that if the Titan was anything like the fountain, maybe they could steal a like one as well. However, the Titan finds us quickly, and as we haste to climb back on, its own spawn comes out, making it known to us that we haven't much time left until the world is roamed by Titans and engulfed in something darker than darkness itself. When we reach a safe spot, Susie successfully fully heals us for the creature awaiting us at the edge. Despite it being a creature of darkest dark, its wings remind one of an angel. It sends a spawn upon us, and only our soul's shine can challenge its dark. We fight with all our strength and destroy their heart-shaped shield until it no longer can challenge us, but shriek in pain. But its giant wings cover itself, and by swallowing its own spawn, they heal completely. As we lose our hope, The old man makes his appearance in full armor, joining arms with us in battle. Once we manage to destroy its shield again, Susie thinks of an idea, asking Chris to entrust her with their life. She holds us tight and launches herself on the Titan's inside, where the fountain laid. Our heart shows itself, and with a light so bright, it seals the fountain. We find ourselves on the ground. Seeing that the old man was nowhere to be found, Susie rushes as she wanted to talk with him one last time. Ralsei also comes in that moment, but upon noticing Susie's absence, he shivers in fear, rushing towards her, yelling her to stop. The prophecy reads, "The last prophecy, the story's end." And then, when all hope is lost for this tale, the final tragedy unveils. We catch up to Ralsei yelling at Susie to avert her eyes, which is when the tapestry shatters before we can see anything. Blood gushes out from her tightly clenched fist. As Ralsei profusely apologizes in a panic state, Susie just responds with a shut up, but not out of anger. She laughs, asking if that was the reason he was so worried. She continues to laugh hysterically, telling us that she, nor Chris, nor him for that matter, would let something like that ever happen. She grabs his face softly as she asks him to stop crying. As she goes on ahead, Ralsei can't help but stare at the emptiness, questioning how Susie could be that kind, and that maybe, just maybe, by being compassionate, they could change the prophecy. But when he turns his face, his cheek is splattered with fresh blood as he continued that our fates had been sealed. He falls to the floor, apologizing that he didn't mean to make this about him, before looking back up with a fake smile, trying to convince us and himself that everything was alright. But instead we just hug him tightly, saying that it was okay to not smile. He cries out his heart, explaining that he too was scared in reality, but he would try to change, to believe that they could change their fates. He tells us to return to Susie before staring back at the emptiness, and we go on to seal the original fountain. When we arrive back, Toriel is nowhere to be found, so Susie looks back at us, asking if Toriel was even in here before falling silent, and wishing to just leave the church. But to her dismay, Toriel was back at the house, dancing the night away with Mr. Sands. She looks back at Chris in suspicion upon this sight. She leaves right after refusing Toriel's offer to stay the night. And with nothing to do now, we head off to bed, but the music gets louder. Their voices echo throughout. Chris turns and rolls in bed, with her heart locked in the cage. Chris yells out in desperation, moving towards the window as the screen splits in two, one showing Chris, the other Susie. She talks out loud to herself that they weren't gonna let that happen before rain starts pouring down. Chris climbs up to the window before getting a call from the knight, telling them to not forget, as the screen turns black. This was such a ride. You could tell just how much both Toby and Temmie improved over the years, and considering the fact that Undertale was made in order to serve sort of like a prologue to Deltarune and its characters is just so fascinating to me. And it does show. I haven't played that much of Undertale to be honest, but I was already having more fun and just caring a lot more about the characters. Maybe this was due to the fact that Deltarune plays out more like a classical JRPG, with a pace and long chapters than anything else. I'm mainly thinking of Final Fantasy VII here. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but I sometimes have trouble taking a story seriously if there's too many funny bits here and there alongside the heavy stuff, as it makes me almost forget about what had happened beforehand. So I'm sorry that I didn't really have any theories to add to the conversation. I highly recommend watching Andrew Cunningham's video on the night. I'll put them on screen now, and a couple of others in the description as well, if you're interested. I'd also like to recommend Dweller's Empty Path and Escape Chasm while we wait for the new chapters. They're RPG Maker games by Temmie Chang, and it's free on itch.io, so go play it. Well, thanks for watching! If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, that would really help me out, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!